I picked up my daughter-in-law's coat from the dry cleaners. The owner, a man I'd known for many years, suddenly pulled me aside and whispered, "Listen to me carefully. Take your grandchildren and get out of this town before dawn." I froze. "Why?" I asked. He pulled out a small plastic bag and his voice trembling said, "Because I found this inside your daughter-in-law's coat." When I saw what was inside, it took my breath away. Without a second thought, I grabbed my grandchildren and... I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. As evening fell, the day's heat still clung to my fingers as I carried the heavy basket from the market. Sweat soaked through my blouse, and I walked slowly down the old street, where the peeling walls told the story of this town's many years. Mr. Julian's dry cleaning shop appeared on the corner, its faded wooden sign swaying in the wind. I stopped, pulling the crumpled yellow claim ticket from my purse. That morning, Maggie, my daughter-in-law, had pressed it into my hand, her voice soft but hurried. "Mom, please, could you pick up my wool coat from Mr. Julian's? I have meetings all day." I'd nodded without much thought. To me, it was just one more errand, like so many I was always running for my children. When I walked in, the smell of fabric softener mingled with the steam hissing from a corner. Mr. Julian, an old man with glasses perched on the end of his nose, was behind the counter, flipping through a ledger with his bony hands. I handed him the ticket. He glanced at it and nodded, disappearing into the back storeroom without a word. Normally, he'd send the young man who worked for him, but today he went himself, moving slowly as if trying to buy time. I waited without a worry, stroking the handle of my basket, thinking only about what I would cook for my grandchildren that night. He returned with Maggie's coat, carefully wrapped in clear plastic, smelling of fresh laundry. But instead of handing it to me, he paused, his eyes scanning the shop to make sure no one else was there. It struck me as odd, and before I could ask, his rough, calloused hand gripped my arm tightly. "Carol," he murmured, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "Come here for a moment." Without giving me time to react, he pulled me behind a worn-out curtain that sectioned off the back of the shop. The smell of bleach and steam made it hard to breathe. Piles of clothes waiting to be pressed were stacked like a messy wall hiding something. "You need to see this," he said, his voice trembling as he opened a rickety drawer beneath the counter. From it, he pulled out a small, clear plastic bag, just big enough to make my heart stop. Inside was a bank transfer receipt, stamped in red, with a figure so large I had to look at it several times to be sure I wasn't mistaken. Tens of thousands of dollars. Who would keep something like that in a coat pocket? And next to the paper, a photograph. The innocent faces of Lucy and Matthew, my grandchildren, with circles drawn over them in red marker. They were crooked, angry circles, as if drawn in a fit of rage, or even worse, with some dark intention. I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins, my hands suddenly cold as stone. "Mr. Julian, what is this?" I stammered, my voice breaking. He shook his head, his eyes wide with fear, as if even he couldn't bear what he'd found. "Carol, you have to get the children out of here, immediately. Don't waste a second. You have to be gone before dawn." His voice was raw, almost pleading. I wanted to ask more. I wanted an explanation, but he just pressed the bag into my hand, repeating, "I can't keep this here. It's too terrifying." I took the coat, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I shoved the bag deep into my pocket, feeling as if I were carrying a bomb about to explode. As I left, my steps were unsteady, like I was walking on air, unable to feel the ground beneath my feet. The basket tipped, a few tomatoes rolling out, nearly spilling onto the sidewalk. Outside, the world continued with its usual noise. The screech of a bus's brakes, the calls of street vendors, the laughter of children running down the street. But in my head, only Mr. Julian's insistent voice echoed, repeating like a funeral bell. Before dawn, the sky darkened, the evening shadow swallowed by the sick night. I entered the house, my feet as heavy as stones, the zip-top bag holding the terrifying secret still in my pocket, burning like a curse. The large house, once filled with Lucy and Matthew's laughter, was now eerily silent. Austin, my son, was on a business trip in Chicago, hundreds of miles away. It was just me, my two small grandchildren, and the terrifying void Maggie had left behind. My phone buzzed. A short text from my daughter-in-law. "Mom, a last-minute meeting came up. I'll be very late. Please watch the kids." I stared at the words on the screen, and a nameless dread rose in my chest. Was it the truth, or just an excuse to hide something? I went into the living room, where Lucy and Matthew were focused on playing with blocks on the old rug. Lucy, my 7-year-old granddaughter with her big, round eyes, was carefully building a little house out of colorful pieces. "Grandma, look, my house has a chimney!" she shouted excitedly, her voice clear as a bell. Matthew, my little 4-year-old, was beside her, clutching a plastic dinosaur and humming a wordless tune. Seeing them, my heart clenched. Just hours before, I thought they were safe in the arms of their family, but now, the image of those 2 red circles on the photo haunted me, like an invisible threat lurking somewhere nearby. I forced a smile, stroking Lucy's head. "That's beautiful, my love. Time to rest a little. Grandma's going to make dinner." But my mind was spinning. Mr. Julian's voice wouldn't stop. "You have to be gone before dawn." I didn't know what I was running from, but my instincts as a mother and a grandmother told me those 2 children couldn't stay here a minute longer. I walked silently to my bedroom, locked the door, and with a trembling hand dialed the number of Rose, a nurse, and a friend I trusted completely. Rose and I had been through so much together, from the lean years of raising our children to the endless nights watching over my husband in the hospital. If there was anyone I could count on now, it was her. "Hello, Rose." "It's me, Carol," I whispered, my voice cracking with worry. "I need your help. Do you know a reliable cab service? One that can make a long trip tonight?" Rose was silent for a moment, perhaps sensing the strangeness in my voice. "Carol, what's wrong? Why the urgency?" I took a deep breath, holding back tears. "I can't explain right now. I just need a cab as soon as possible." Rose didn't press. She just answered briefly, "I'll call my brother. He's a driver, very discreet. Give me 10 minutes. I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see me, and hung up with a knot in my stomach. I went to the kitchen, my hands moving quickly. I took some bread from the cabinet, sliced some cheese, and packed some cookies the kids loved. I put a couple of water bottles in a small bag, trying to think of what else I might need. I didn't know where I was going, only that my grandchildren couldn't go hungry or be left helpless. From the kitchen, I glanced into the living room. Lucy was showing Matthew how to build a bridge. Their laughter felt like knives in my chest. They were so innocent, so carefree, with no idea of the storm about to break over our family. I wondered if I was wrong, if this was all a misunderstanding and I was overreacting. But then the image of the photo with the 2 red circles flashed in my mind again, and I knew I had no other choice. I ran to the kids' room, opened the closet, and grabbed a few items of clothing. The blue sweater Lucy liked, Matthew's superhero pajamas, several pairs of socks. I also threw in the yarn doll Lucy always hugged to sleep, and the toy car Matthew never let go of. I tossed everything into a large suitcase, a jumbled mess, but there was no time to fold anything. The streetlight outside flickered through the window like a will-o'-the-wisp, making my heart pound. I drew the curtains, afraid a curious neighbor might notice my strange haste. This is a small town. Everyone knows everyone, and I didn't want anyone asking questions. My phone buzzed again. A text from Rose. "The cab is here on the corner. My brother's name is Mike. You can trust him." I took a deep, calming breath. I went out to the living room, knelt beside Lucy, and gently shook her shoulder. "Let's go, my love," I whispered in the sweetest voice I could manage. "Put on your coat. We're going for a night ride." Lucy looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "A night ride? Where to, Grandma?" I smiled, though I was a wreck inside. "To a very fun place. But we have to leave now, or it'll be too late." Matthew rubbed his eyes, starting to whine about being woken up. I'm sleepy, Grandma, he murmured drowsily. I pulled a piece of candy from my pocket and placed it in his hand. Here, be a good boy. Come with me, you can sleep more later. Matthew grinned from ear to ear and immediately forgot about being tired. I picked him up, took Lucy by the hand, and hurried toward the cab waiting on the corner. The hallway to the front door seemed endless, my sandals dragging against the cold floor in a rushed, trembling rhythm. I put the children in the back seat and carefully fastened their seat belts. Lucy hugged her doll, looking at me with curiosity but still trusting. Matthew let out a long yawn, resting his head on his sister's shoulder. I sat beside them, clutching the suitcase to my chest, my heart heavy. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired face, watched me in the rear-view mirror. "Where are you headed at this hour, ma'am?" he asked, his tone concerned. I swallowed hard, my voice breaking. "To the bus station. Please, as fast as you can." The car pulled away, shattering the stillness of the night. Through the window, I watched the house recede, sinking into the darkness like a tomb holding secrets and betrayal. The bus station at midnight was as bustling as a market that never sleeps. Green and red neon signs flickered above old posters, making me dizzy. The shouts of vendors, the horns of arriving buses, and the screech of suitcases rolling over concrete blended into a chaotic symphony. And yet that chaos made me feel safer, as if my grandchildren and I could get lost in the crowd and escape the invisible eyes that were watching us. I held Lucy's hand tightly. Matthew was fast asleep on my shoulder, his warm breath on my neck a reminder that I had to stay strong, even if I was falling apart inside. I went to the ticket counter, forcing myself to sound calm as I asked, 3 tickets to Santa Fe, the last bus of the night." The clerk, a man with a scruffy mustache, glanced at me and the children, then slid 3 tickets through the window. "It's leaving right now. Get on quick or you'll miss it," he said in a monotone voice. I nodded, paid, and turned to Lucy, forcing a smile. "We're going to visit a distant relative." "You're going to love it." The girl nodded, though her big eyes reflected her curiosity. "Which relative, Grandma? Do I know them?" I stroked her hair, avoiding her gaze. "It's an old family member you haven't met yet. Get some sleep, it's a long ride." Lucy nodded again, hugging her yarn doll tightly, her eyes fixed on the bus window. The bus lurched forward, the engine's roar breaking the night's silence. Matthew stayed asleep on my shoulder, his head lolling, his hand still clutching his toy car. I looked out the window as the streetlights streaked by, blurry like fading memories. Santa Fe, the city where I'd lived more than 20 years ago, was the only option that came to mind. It was where my husband and I had built the first years of our marriage, where Austin was born, and where I had once felt safe. Now I just hoped that city could be a refuge for the 3 of us, even if only for a little while. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just running away. I was searching for a way to face a truth I didn't yet dare to name. When we arrived in Santa Fe, the sun was just beginning to rise, the pale dawn light filtering between the old adobe rooftops. I carried Matthew and led Lucy to a small inn tucked away behind the central plaza. The room was cramped, with a faint smell of dampness and a double bed covered in faded sheets. I put both children on the bed and tucked them in. In her sleep, Lucy murmured, "Grandma, where's Mommy?" The question pierced my heart like a dagger. I just stroked her hair and whispered, "Sleep, sweetie. Your mommy is busy. She'll be here soon." But I knew it was a lie. Maggie, the daughter-in-law I had once loved so much, was now an enigma, a dark shadow I was afraid to confront. I sat by the window, my hands clasped, my mind racing. The plastic bag was still in my coat pocket, heavy as a purse. The transfer receipt, the photo with the 2 red circles, and Mr. Julian's warning were pieces of a puzzle I didn't know how to begin solving. I thought of Austin, my son, so far away. I wanted to call him, to tell him everything, but every time I picked up the phone, I hesitated. If I was wrong, if this was all a misunderstanding, I would destroy his family. But if I was right, if Maggie was truly involved in something terrible, how could I tell my son that the woman he loved, the mother of his children, might be betraying us all? In the midst of my confusion, an idea sparked. I had to go to the church. Father Stephen, the elderly priest in Santa Fe, was the only one I could trust right now. He had been there for me when my husband died, holding my hand through the darkest days. If anyone could help me find my way, it was him. I decided that morning I would take the children to Mass, to pray for peace, and to find a way out. The next day, I woke Lucy and Matthew and helped them get dressed. "You're coming to church with me, and afterward I'll buy you ice cream," I told them, faking a cheerful tone. Matthew's face lit up. "Chocolate, Grandma?" I smiled and nodded, though my stomach was in knots. We walked to the old San Francisco church, where the ancient stone walls and the ringing of the bells offered a rare sense of calm. Lucy held my hand while Matthew ran ahead, his toy car dangling from his fingers. Looking at them, all I prayed for was to preserve that innocence forever. Father Stephen recognized me the moment I walked in. His white hair shone under the light streaming through the stained glass windows, and his eyes, kind but piercing, fixed on me. "Carol, it's been too long," he said in a warm voice. "What brings you and your grandchildren here? Is something wrong?" I could only nod, unable to speak in front of the children. After Mass, I let Lucy and Matthew play in the church courtyard with the other kids. I asked Father Stephen for a private word. In a small, quiet room behind the altar, the smell of old wood and melted wax helped me breathe a little easier. Gathering my courage, I told him everything: Maggie's coat, the transfer receipt for a massive sum, and the terrifying photo of Lucy and Matthew with the 2 red circles. I handed him the plastic bag, my hands shaking. Father Stephen was silent for a long time, his hands clasped together, his face growing harder by the second. Finally, he sighed and said in a grave voice, "Carol, this is beyond what a priest can handle. This isn't just a family matter. It's something much more dangerous. You need someone who understands the law." He paused, looking at me with deep concern. "I know someone who can help. Fernanda, a very good lawyer and a member of our parish. She'll know what to do." I nodded, feeling a ray of hope light up in the darkness. That same afternoon, in the small confessional room, I met Fernanda for the first time. She was young, maybe a little over 30, with short hair and eyes so sharp they seemed to see right through you. Wearing latex gloves, she carefully opened the bag and examined the receipt under the dim yellow light. "This transaction code belongs to a shell company registered in Cancun," she said as her fingers flew across her laptop, her face serious with concentration. "A company that doesn't exist." She stopped and pointed to the last line of the document. "Signed by Cortés Herrera." The name meant nothing to me, but when Fernanda looked at Father Stephen, they exchanged a loaded glance. "That man has been involved in financial fraud and money laundering," Fernanda said in a low voice. "This is not a simple matter, Carol." I felt my hands resting on the wooden table begin to tremble. "But why my grandchildren?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why are their faces marked in red?" Fernanda didn't answer right away. He just looked at me with compassion. "We need to investigate further," she said finally. "But the first thing is for you and the children to stay here, where you'll be safe. I'll contact some trusted colleagues to look into this." Father Stephen placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "Carol, God will protect you and your grandchildren, but you must be strong for them." I hugged Lucy and Matthew as we left the church, the gray afternoon blanketing the cobblestone streets. The bells rang behind us, a reminder that I was no longer alone. The next day, I found myself standing in front of the inn in Santa Fe, my heart on fire. Lucy and Matthew were playing in the yard of Rose, my old nurse friend whom I trusted completely. I watched them through the wooden fence. Lucy was teaching Matthew how to blow soap bubbles, and their crystalline laughter filled the sunny morning. I smiled, but the smile felt heavy, as if every second I spent there was stolen from them. "Rose, can you watch the kids for a day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have to go back to town to take care of some important personal matters." Rose looked at me, her sharp eyes seeming to want to ask more, but she only nodded. Don't you worry, Carol, the kids will be fine with me. I'll make them flan and tell them stories. I squeezed her hand, saying nothing more, but my heart was filled with infinite gratitude. I took the first bus of the morning back to my town, huddled in a seat at the back, the zip-top bag still in my coat pocket, like a constant reminder of the terrifying secret I was carrying. The landscape passed by the window, dry cornfields, dilapidated houses, but I saw nothing but the image of the 2 red circles over the photo of Lucy and Matthew. I wondered what I was doing, if it was right to leave the children behind and return to this dangerous place. But I knew that if I wanted to protect them, I had to uncover the truth, no matter how cruel it might be. The family house came into view as the bus reached the last stop. It was silent, cold, no longer the home that Austin and I had built over so many years. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting for me to discover it. I took the spare key from the bottom of my purse and with a trembling hand opened the gate. The screech of the hinges echoed in the silence, making me whip my head around in alarm. The street was deserted, only a few dogs barking in the distance. I went inside and closed the door, feeling like I was crossing into another world, where everything I had believed could come crashing down. The living room was just as I had left it the day before. Maggie's light blanket was thrown carelessly over the sofa, as if she had been there just hours ago. To one side, a half-finished cup of coffee, the dried foam now a brown stain. I stood there looking around, trying to find some sign, some clue to explain what was happening. But the air in the house was heavy, as if even the walls were keeping secrets. I didn't hesitate any longer and went straight to Austin and Maggie's bedroom where I knew I had to look. Under the closet, the small gray safe was still there, motionless like a silent accomplice. I remembered Austin's birthday a few months ago, when Maggie, drunk after several shots of tequila, had let the combination slip while laughing with me. "Mom, you have no idea. Austin always tells me to change the code, but I like 12/1/5/18, our wedding day." At the time, I had just laughed, thinking it was a trivial detail, but now, that sequence was the key to unlocking the truth. I knelt, dragging out the dust-covered safe. My hands shook as I turned each number, 12/05/18. The sharp click echoed like a gunshot in the silence, making my heart leap. I opened the heavy door of the safe, breathing heavily. Inside, stacks of dollar bills were piled neatly, the green bills gleaming, leaving me stunned. Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, a sum my family had never dreamed of. Next to them, a stack of fake passports and IDs with unfamiliar names: Maria Gonzalez, Juan Alvarez, Sofia Morales. I flipped through them one by one, my heart pounding as if I were reading a list of ghosts. In a corner were 2 sealed cell phones ready to be activated for some plan, but what took my breath away were the papers at the bottom. 3 business-class plane tickets from New York to Madrid in the names of Maggie, Lucy, and Matthew. Austin's name was not there. I checked them over and over, hoping I was wrong, but the cold truth was like a knife twisting in my chest. Maggie was planning to run, to take my grandchildren and leave my son behind like an inconvenience. My hands shaking, I pulled out one more envelope. Inside was a photo. Maggie smiling radiantly next to an unknown man, elegant in a black suit. On the back of the photo, a handwritten scrawl, "My Cortez." That name, Cortez Herrera, matched the signature on the transfer receipt. The whole room started to spin. The air grew thick, and I struggled to breathe. I sank to the floor, my back against the dresser, the photo falling from my hands. Maggie, the daughter-in-law I had loved like a daughter, the one who cooked with me for family dinners, the one who cried on my shoulder when Austin had trouble at work. That woman was betraying us. Not only was she betraying Austin, she was planning to take my 2 grandchildren, as if they were part of a package deal. I thought of Lucy, with her innocent smile as she drew pictures for me, and of Matthew, with his habit of hugging my legs whenever I baked. How could she be so cruel? How could she circle their little faces with a red marker as if they were merchandise? At that moment, the familiar sound of our neighbor Mr. Peterson's motorcycle rumbled down the street. I jumped, hastily stuffing everything back into the safe, trying to leave it as it was. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped a passport, but I managed to grab it, shove the safe back into place, and lock it. My heart was pounding so hard I felt like a guilty person. I stood up, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and tried to calm myself. As I headed for the door, I spotted a torn envelope in the kitchen trash can, the logo of a foreign bank gleaming under the light. Instinctively, I grabbed it and stuffed it into my jacket pocket without thinking. When the door slammed shut behind me, I walked out onto the street as if I were floating. I knew I wasn't just running away anymore. In my pocket, I carried the proof of a terrible plan. Maggie intended to escape with Cortez, taking a fortune, abandoning Austin, and worst of all, taking my 2 grandchildren with her. I returned to the inn in Santa Fe, my legs heavy as lead, my pockets still holding the horrifying evidence from the house. It was now midday, and the dim sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, falling on the old wooden floor. Lucy and Matthew had just woken up from their nap and were sitting on the bed, rubbing their eyes. Lucy, her hair tangled, looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Grandma, when are we going home to Mommy?" Her question was like a knife in my chest. I knelt, stroked her hair, and tried to smile, though I knew it was forced. "Soon, my love. Your mommy is busy with something. You'll stay with me for a few more days, okay?" But my throat was closing up. I couldn't say more. Matthew, hugging his plastic dinosaur, chimed in. "Grandma, I want cookies." I nodded, pulled a package from my bag, and gave it to him, just to hide my still trembling hands. I took them both to the small courtyard of the inn, where there was an old swing set. "Play for a little while, I'll watch you from here," I told them, trying to sound calm. But inside, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff. What I had found in the safe, the stacks of money, the fake passports, the plane tickets, and the photo of Maggie with Cortez wouldn't stop tormenting me. I knew I couldn't stay here forever or keep running without facing the truth. But how could I protect my grandchildren if their own mother, the woman I had once trusted, was part of this nightmare? In the afternoon, Fernanda arrived, her steps quick but her eyes full of concern. She was with 2 men in plain clothes, though their demeanor radiated a cold professionalism. They introduced themselves as federal agents, showing badges with official seals. "Mrs. Sanchez, I'm Officer Raul," one of them said in a deep, firm voice. "This is my partner, Officer Diego. We need to see everything you found." I nodded and led them to the cramped rental room where a small wooden table had become the center of the entire truce. I laid everything out on the table, the receipt for the massive transfer, the bank envelope, the photo of Maggie smiling next to Cortez, 3 plane tickets to Madrid, and a stack of fake passports. Each object felt like a fresh stab, a reminder of Maggie's betrayal. Officer Diego took a still-sealed cell phone and connected it to a small device with a USB cable. His laptop screen lit up, showing lines of code scrolling at high speed. "We can recover deleted data," he said without looking up. "These things usually hold more information than people think." I sat there, my hands clasped, my heart pounding. Outside, Lucy and Matthew were playing in the courtyard, their laughter drifting in, but I didn't dare look. I felt that if I lost control for even a second, I would let out the pain that was suffocating me. After a few tense minutes, Diego turned the screen toward me. There was a photo folder, and the first image was of Lucy and Matthew again. Their innocent faces were circled in red marker, distorted with cruel intent. I held my breath, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Officer Raul pointed at the screen, his voice lowering, as if trying to keep me from falling apart. "Ma'am, this isn't a personal mark. It's a symbol used in human trafficking networks." The word trafficking hit me like thunder, leaving me paralyzed. He enlarged the image and showed a series of tiny numbers in the corner. "It's a transaction code. The red circle means target selected. The children, they're part of a much bigger plan." Instinctively, I wrapped my arms around myself, as if I could protect my grandchildren even though they were outside, shielding them from that terrifying truth. My eyes filled with tears, but I refused to cry, not wanting the little ones to see me. "Are you saying they were planning to sell my grandchildren?" I asked in a trembling voice barely audible. Raul nodded, his eyes full of compassion. "We don't know the full plan yet, but this evidence points to an organized criminal network. And the woman in this photo," he pointed to Maggie, "is very likely an accomplice." Fernanda put her hand on my shoulder, her own voice shaking slightly. "Carol, this is no longer a family matter. This is an extremely serious criminal case. We're going to do everything we can to protect the children." But her words couldn't calm the storm inside me. Maggie, the daughter-in-law I had loved like a daughter, the one who was with me when Matthew was born, the one who had shared so many laughs on family nights. How could she be so cruel? How could she turn two children, her own flesh and blood, into targets for a dirty business? Diego kept typing on the laptop, pulling up deleted messages. One appeared, short but cold. "2 targets selected. Ensure timely delivery." The message was sent from Maggie's number to an unknown number signed CH, Cortez Herrera. I felt the blood in my body freeze. She really did this," I murmured, not knowing who I was talking to. Fernanda took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Carol, I know this is incredibly painful, but you have to be strong for the children. They told me to remain calm, to act as if nothing was wrong. Do not contact Maggie," Raul said firmly. "She can't know what you've discovered. We need time to investigate further." I nodded, but my heart was a tangled mess. How could I pretend to be normal when every breath I took was filled with the pain of betrayal? How could I look into Lucy and Matthew's eyes knowing their mother had planned to sell them like merchandise? I brought my grandchildren back into the room, trying to play with them as usual. "Grandma, tell the story about the vampire," Matthew insisted, climbing onto my lap. I hugged the little boy and told him his favorite story, but my voice broke, as if I were lost in a nightmare myself. Lucy sat to one side, drawing with colored pencils, humming a song. I looked at them and my chest ached as if it were being torn apart. They were carefree, innocent, unaware that their world had been on the verge of being shattered by the very mother they loved. Outside, dark clouds rolled in, and a sudden downpour began. The rain hammered on the inn's tin roof, matching the rhythm of the chaos in my chest. I drew the curtains and held my children close, trying to protect them from the storm outside and from the storm within me. The next morning, a black car with no license plates or lights pulled up in front of the inn, but I knew it was a federal police vehicle. Fernanda had called earlier to tell me to be ready. "Carol, we're going to plan everything today," she had said over the phone, her voice confident but with a hint of worry. I quickly put on a sweater, woke the 2 grandchildren and asked them to stay with Rose for one more day. "Where are you going, Grandma?" Lucy asked with her big, curious eyes. I stroked her head, forcing a smile. "I'm going to see an old friend. I'll be back for you this afternoon." Matthew, nibbling on a cookie, nodded without asking any more questions. I kissed them both on the forehead and got into the car, my heart as heavy as if I were carrying the weight of the world. The federal police office in Santa Fe was hidden on a narrow street, with no sign to indicate that serious cases were handled there. I went inside and was led to a small meeting room that smelled of old coffee and paperwork. Fernanda was already waiting, sitting at a long table. Across from her were 3 officers, Raul, Diego, and a female officer named Sophia, whose gaze was both stern and gentle. "Carol, we've reviewed the evidence you gave us," Raul began, his voice grave and sharp. "This is a major case, connected to an international crime ring. We need your cooperation to capture Maggie and Cortez." They explained the plan. They would create a fake scenario where Lucy and Matthew had disappeared, forcing Maggie and Cortez to panic and reveal their next moves. "We will monitor all their communications," Sophia said, pointing to a screen showing a map of the city. "We've placed a listening device on Maggie's phone and are tracking Cortez's number. They will contact each other and then we'll have all the evidence we need. I listened, but my heart clenched. And my grandchildren? Will they be safe? I asked, my voice trembling, unable to hide my fear. Sophia placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze firm. Don't worry. We have an absolutely secure safe house for the children. You can video call them whenever you want to see them. They took me to another room, where a social worker was playing with Lucy and Matthew in a room filled with toys. Lucy was coloring a picture, and Matthew was building with Legos, babbling a story about a spaceship. Looking at them, I felt like crying. They had no idea I was trying to protect them from their own mother. Carol, the children will stay here with me, the social worker said in a soft voice. I'll take care of them as if they were my own. I nodded, hugged my 2 grandchildren tightly one last time before I left, feeling as if I was leaving a piece of my heart behind. That night I returned to the inn and sat alone in the small room, phone in hand, waiting. Fernanda and Diego were with me. The listening device was on the table, and the laptop screen glowed with the messages being monitored. Just as we expected, my phone vibrated. A text from Maggie, her tone desperate. Mom, where are you? Have you seen the kids? They're gone. I've called the police. I'm scared to death. I read the message and my heart tightened. How could she pretend like this? How could she write those words when she herself had planned to take my grandchildren away? Diego signaled for me not to answer, just shaking his head slightly. Let her tangle herself up, he murmured. Half an hour later, Maggie's phone called an unknown number. The listening device activated and her voice came through the speaker, nervous and shaky. Cortez, the kids are gone. I had everything ready, but I can't find them anywhere. The man's voice on the other end was rough and annoyed. Calm down. We can't back out now. The plane tickets are bought. The buyer on the other side is waiting. If we don't have the merchandise, we're in big trouble. The word buyer was like a knife twisting in my skin. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, trying to hold back my tears. Lucy and Matthew, my 2 little angels, being called merchandise. I wanted to scream, to go and confront Maggie, but Diego gestured for me to stay silent, his gaze cold. The call ended, but Maggie kept sending messages to Cortez. If we don't find the kids, the whole plan will fall apart. You have to do something. Diego managed a cold smile. Let it fall apart. That's how it should be, he said gravely. This confession will be irrefutable proof at trial. Fernanda took my hand and squeezed it gently, as if trying to give me strength. Carol, we're almost done with this, she said, but her voice cracked too, as if she could feel my pain. I stayed there, my cold hands clasped, feeling both a deep fear and a strange sense of relief. Relief because I knew Maggie and Cortez were digging their own graves. But the pain still crushed my chest. I thought about the past, when Maggie was a shy young woman who had just joined our family. When she would sit with me in the kitchen, kneading bread and telling me her dream of opening a small shop. I had loved her. I thought she was family. But now, every memory was like a wound reopening each time I thought of it. Outside the window, the night was thick without a single star. I heard the soft hum of several unlit cars parked silently on the corner. They were like beasts in waiting, patiently stalking their prey. I looked at Fernanda, then at Diego, and felt like I was in a chess game where I didn't know the final move. Carol, you did the right thing, Fernanda said, her voice low but firm. You saved your grandchildren. I nodded, but inside a doubt began to grow. Had I really saved them, or was I just dragging them into a new nightmare? That night, darkness covered Santa Fe like a thick veil. I was sitting inside a federal police command vehicle, parked 2 blocks from a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The air inside the car was heavy, the smell of engine oil and cold coffee making it even harder to breathe. Fernanda was beside me, her expression as hard as steel, but her hands were clasped so tightly they were white, as if she were trying to contain her own tension. Officer Sophia, who had reassured me that morning, was adjusting the radio, her voice low but clear. Carol, you just stay here and listen. We'll handle everything. But how could I be calm when my heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest? Lucy and Matthew were safe in the police station playroom, but just knowing I was about to witness Maggie's betrayal made me tremble. Short, sharp commands crackled over the radio. Alpha Team, position on the northeast corner. Bravo Team, cover the rear exit. The target is approaching the meeting point. I clenched my hands, my nails digging into my palms, trying not to show my fear. Fernanda put a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "Carol, it will all be over tonight. You did the right thing getting the children out." I nodded, but tears were already streaming silently down my cheeks. The right thing? What had I done besides run and ask for help? Yet, deep in my heart, I knew I had no other choice. I had to protect my grandchildren, even if the price was facing the heartbreaking truth about my daughter-in-law, a woman I had once loved like a daughter. Sophia patched the live feed from the listening device through, and Maggie's voice filled the car, trembling and rushed. "Cortez, I don't get it. Where are those two? Without them, what are we going to deliver for the deal?" Every word cut me like a knife. Deal! That word made me want to scream, to lunge out and slap her. How could she talk about Lucy and Matthew, her own children, as if they were merchandise? Cortez's rough, harsh voice replied, "Shut up! Let's get to the motel first. The middleman is already waiting there. If we don't have the merchandise, we're finished." I held my breath, as if all the air in the car had vanished. Middleman, merchandise. The words were needles in my chest, reminding me that this wasn't just a family betrayal, but a monstrous crime. Sophia whispered into the radio, "Target has entered the parking lot. Prepare to move in." Through the microphone, I heard the thud of a car door closing, then rapid footsteps on concrete. I pictured Maggie and Cortez, two tense figures moving through the empty parking lot, unaware they were walking straight into a police trap. Suddenly, a firm shout shattered the quiet. "Federal police! Hands in the air!" The thunder of running boots, the click of flashlights turning on, and then a sharp shriek from Maggie, so piercing it tore through the night. "No, it can't be!" she screamed, her voice filled with terror. Over the radio, I heard the sounds of a struggle. "Cortez, run!" Maggie yelled, but an officer immediately ordered, "Freeze! Hands up or I'll shoot." There was a thud, then the sound of Cortez's body hitting the ground next to a white van. "Don't move," another voice commanded. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs being snapped shut. Maggie was sobbing, her voice in pieces. "You're mistaken. I didn't do anything." But right after, I heard her purse fall to the ground, wads of cash spilling out, and an officer's cold voice say, "Anything else you want to say?" Sitting in the car, I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears streamed silently down my face. I didn't know if I was crying out of relief that the trap had worked, or from the pain of facing the truth that Maggie, whom I had considered a daughter, had been willing to sell my two grandchildren. Fernanda took my hand and squeezed it hard. "Carol, they've got them. The children are safe," she said, her voice trembling. But the pain inside me didn't subside. I thought of the nights Maggie had sat with me laughing, sharing her small dreams. I had believed her, loved her, thought she was part of the family. Now, all that was left was a ghost, someone who had tried to destroy everything. A voice came over the radio, brief but authoritative. "Both targets secured. Operation successful. No casualties." Outside, sirens blared to life all at once, red and blue lights flashing against the old motel walls. I heard the engines of patrol cars starting, voices giving orders, hurried footsteps. The night seemed torn apart by the chaos, but for me, it was the signal that the web of fate had finally closed. A few weeks later, I sat in the courtroom of the federal courthouse in Santa Fe. The air was heavy, thick, as if the walls themselves held secrets. The benches were filled with townspeople, mixed with a few reporters armed with cameras and notebooks, their sharp eyes ready to capture every moment. I held Lucy and Matthew close. The children snuggled against me, as if sensing the tension in the room. Fernanda was beside me, rubbing my back, whispering, "Carol, it will all be over today. You've been so brave, but how could I feel strong when my heart was in pieces?" The truth about Maggie, about her terrible plan, was about to come to light, and I knew it would leave scars on me and my grandchildren that could never be erased. Maggie appeared in the defendant's box wearing a beige prison uniform, her hair matted, with no trace of the radiant daughter-in-law I had known. Her face was gaunt, aged 10 years, her eyes sunken as if haunted by her own guilt. Next to her, Cortez trembled, his hands cuffed, his head bowed, unable to look at anyone. Seeing them, I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pain, or just a cold emptiness in my chest. I had loved Maggie, believed she was part of the family, even defended her in her fights with Austin. But now she was just a stranger, a woman who had tried to sell my grandchildren like they were property. The prosecutors, a middle-aged man with a firm voice, stood up and began to speak. Your Honor, we are here today to try a particularly heinous case involving money laundering, conspiracy to commit child abduction, and participation in a transnational criminal organization. He presented the evidence one by one, each piece like another stab to my heart. The transfer receipt for a massive sum appeared on the large screen, the red numbers causing a murmur to ripple through the courtroom. Next, he showed a pile of fake passports, strange names that hinted at the criminal network Maggie and Cortez were part of. 3 plane tickets to Madrid in the names of Maggie, Lucy, and Matthew only were projected, making me squeeze my grandchildren's hands so they wouldn't feel me trembling. But the moment that made the room gasp was when the photo of Lucy and Matthew appeared, with 2 crooked red circles marking their faces. A few women in the back rows cried out, "How horrible!" The murmuring grew into a wave of outrage and shock. I immediately pulled Lucy and Matthew against me, covering their eyes. "Grandma, what's that?" Lucy whispered innocently. I stroked her hair and answered in a broken voice, "Nothing, sweetie. It's just an old picture." But inside, I wanted to scream, to cry until I was empty. How could I explain to them that their own mother had marked them as targets in a criminal enterprise? The prosecutor continued, his voice growing sharper as he played the recording of the phone call that had changed everything. Maggie's voice filled the courtroom, desperate but cold. "Cortez, the kids are gone. Without them, what are we going to negotiate with?" Cortez's voice replied curtly, "Get to the motel first. The middleman is waiting." The entire room fell silent, the only sound Maggie's ragged breathing over the speaker. I heard every word as if it were being burned into my mind. Each phrase she spoke was a knife, shattering the memories of the days I thought she was family. Maggie's defense attorney stood up, trying to save her. "Your Honor, my client is a victim, manipulated by Cortez Herrera. She was unaware of the trafficking ring and had no intention of harming her children." But the prosecutor shot back immediately, his voice as sharp as a razor. In the recording, the defendant herself says she needed the children to negotiate. That is the act of an accomplice, not a victim. He pointed to the screen where the tape was replayed, and Maggie's words echoed like an undeniable confession. Cortez remained silent, head bowed, like a man accepting his fate. When the judge's gavel struck, the entire room froze for a moment. The defendants, Margaret Lopez and Cortez Herrera, are hereby sentenced to many years in prison for money laundering, conspiracy to commit child abduction, and participation in a transnational criminal organization, the judge declared, his voice deep and firm. The room erupted in comments. Some shook their heads in disgust, others whispered in horror. I remained seated, squeezing Fernanda's hand, breathing a sigh of relief, but with a bitter knot in my throat. Justice had been served, but it couldn't erase the pain in my heart. Lucy tugged on my blouse, her voice very quiet. "Grandma, where's Mommy?" The little girl's question pierced me like a knife. I hugged her tightly, unable to answer. How could I tell her that the mother she loved was being led away in handcuffs? Matthew, sitting beside her, looked up with wide eyes. "Did Mommy go on a work trip, Grandma?" I could only nod, tears falling silently. "Yes, she's very busy. But Grandma and your daddy will always be here with you, okay?" They both nodded, but I knew this truth would remain an eternal scar on their hearts. When we left the courthouse, the blazing midday sun beat down on the plaza. People were dispersing, their laughter and conversations mixing with the sound of traffic. But for me, everything seemed to fade away. Fernanda took my hand and said softly, "Carol, you saved those children. You're their hero." I smiled weakly, but I didn't feel like a hero inside. I was just a grandmother, a mother, trying to protect what little was left of my family. The truth, however cruel, had finally come out. Several months have passed since the trial, and my 2 grandchildren and I have slowly found a new rhythm of life here in Santa Fe. I rented a small apartment near the Central Plaza, where every morning the church bells ring out, a clear, peaceful melody that pulls me from my nightmares about Maggie and Cortés. The apartment isn't large, just a small living room, a kitchen nook, and 2 cramped bedrooms, but to me, it's a sanctuary, a new home for Lucy and Matthew. Every morning, I wake up early and make breakfast, an egg sandwich for Matthew, cookies and milk for Lucy. I comb Lucy's hair, straighten the collar of Matthew's school uniform, and walk them to the elementary school near the San Francisco church. Watching them run toward their classroom, waving back at me with bright smiles, I feel a spark of hope enter my heart, even though the pain still burns like an open wound. One afternoon, as I was watering some chrysanthemums on the balcony, a yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. The door opened and Austin got out, a travel bag slung over his shoulder, his shirt wrinkled from the long trip from Chicago. My son was noticeably thinner, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken as if they carried a story too heavy to bear. I dropped the watering can, water splashing on the ground, and ran to hug him. "Austin, you're back!" I exclaimed, my voice choked with emotion, holding him as tightly as if I feared he might disappear, just like the peaceful days that were already gone. Austin hugged me back, then knelt and opened his arms as Lucy and Matthew came running from inside the house, shouting excitedly, "Daddy! Daddy!" They threw themselves into his arms with laughter, and in that moment, I saw Austin's eyes light up, if only for a second. That night, the 4 of us sat around the small kitchen table. I made the pozole that Austin had loved since he was a boy, the aroma of corn and chili filling the house with warmth. Lucy told stories from school, and Matthew showed off a drawing his teacher had praised. But the atmosphere was still heavy, as if we all knew there was an unspoken topic hanging in the air, something that needed to be said. After I cleared the dishes, I sent the children to their room to play with puzzles and sat down across from Austin. "Son, I have to tell you everything," I said in a solemn voice, clasping my hands to stop them from shaking. I started slowly from that afternoon at Mr. Julian's dry cleaners, when I picked up the coat and found the plastic bag with the transfer receipt and the photo of Lucy and Matthew marked with red circles. I told him about the overnight bus ride, the safe under the dresser, the plane tickets to Madrid without his name, and the trial where the horrific truth about Maggie and Cortés was revealed. Every word was like a stab, not just for me, but for Austin's heart as well. He sat in silence, running his fingers through his messy hair, his eyes red. And when I told him the part where Maggie had called the children merchandise to negotiate with, Austin slammed his hand on the table, and his voice breaking said, "Stop, Mom!" He stood up and began pacing the small room as if he couldn't bear the weight of the truth. "Mom?" "I actually suspected something was wrong with Maggie for a while now," Austin said, his voice filled with anguish. "She started leaving early and coming home late, hiding her phone, and large sums of money would suddenly disappear from the house. I'd ask her, but she always said it was for work. I didn't want to believe she could do something wrong. I thought I was protecting our family, but it turns out I was just a fool." He stopped, turning his face away, his shoulders shaking. I got up and took my son's trembling hand, saying nothing, just silently sharing his pain. I knew Austin's suffering wasn't just from his wife's betrayal, but also from the feeling of helplessness at not having been able to protect his 2 children. From their room, Lucy and Matthew came out quietly as if sensing the tension. Lucy was hugging her yarn doll and asked softly, "Grandma, is Daddy sad?" I nodded, pulling her close and putting another piece of meat in her bowl. "Daddy's just tired from his trip. You eat now." Matthew chimed in with his innocent voice. "Daddy, can we play Legos tomorrow?" Austin managed a weak smile and stroked his head. Yes, we'll play tomorrow. But I knew that smile was just a mask to hide his broken heart. After dinner, when the children were in their room, Austin sat next to me and said firmly, "Mom, I'm filing for divorce. I'm going for full custody of the kids. And with you, I'm going to build a new life for them." I looked at him and saw a determination in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you sure, Austin?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I can't forgive her, Mom. It's not for me, it's for Lucy and Matthew. They deserve a safe life, and I'll do everything to make them happy." I nodded, tears in my eyes. At last, my son had found the courage to face the truth, as painful as it was. That night, I stood on the balcony, looking out at the small, quiet street. The yellow glow of the street lights cast flickering shadows. From inside the house, Austin's voice reading stories to the children mingled with the pure laughter of Lucy and Matthew. And then the teddy bear said, "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." Austin read, and I heard Matthew exclaim, "That bear is so brave." The sound of pages turning added to the atmosphere, bringing a fragile but priceless peace. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and felt a little warmth return to my heart. Time passed quietly. The small apartment I had rented truly became a home where, little by little, the wounds of 3 generations began to heal. The court had already made its final ruling, granting full custody of Lucy and Matthew to Austin and me. When I heard the news, I sat on the sofa clutching a hot cup of tea, feeling as if the heavy weight on my chest had finally been lifted. Every Sunday morning, I took Lucy and Matthew to the nearby park. The bells of the San Francisco church would ring, mixing with the bird song in the trees. Austin, who now had a steady job in Santa Fe, would often play soccer with Matthew on the green grass. The little boy with his short legs would run after the ball, grinning from ear to ear. "Kick it hard, Daddy." Meanwhile, Lucy would happily ride her tricycle around the fountain, her high ponytail flying in the wind. I sat on a bench, sipping a hot coffee, watching the 3 of them play under the sun. The light filtered through the leaves, casting golden flecks on the ground, and in that moment, I felt a peace I had never known before, as if the storm had passed and the sky was finally clear again. One afternoon, the whole family went to the market in the central plaza. The air was filled with the smell of grilled tacos and fresh fruit. Lucy, her eyes shining, picked out an old comic book from a stall, eagerly flipping through the pages. "Grandma, this one has a princess who rides a dragon," she exclaimed, showing me the book. I smiled and stroked her head. "You made a great choice. I'll read it to you tonight." Matthew, on the other hand, insisted on a superhero-shaped balloon tugging on Austin's shirt. "Daddy, buy it for me. Superheroes fly really high." Austin laughed, took out his wallet and paid, while I quietly picked out the freshest bunches of vegetables, some ripe red tomatoes, and a bag of corn to make pozole. These simple moments, like small puzzle pieces, were slowly putting back together the family that had seemed broken. In the apartment, I taped Lucy and Matthew's clumsy drawings to the living room wall. There was one with 4 people, me, Austin, Lucy, and Matthew, holding hands under a red roof with a big sun and a few white clouds. Lucy pointed to the drawing, proud. "This is our house, Grandma." I chose the red roof because it's my favorite color. I looked at the picture with a soft smile, but I felt a lump in my throat. Their mother wasn't in the drawing, and I knew that no matter how hard I tried, that void would always be there. I just hoped that Austin's love and mine would be enough to fill a little of that absence in the children's hearts. Sometimes I would see Maggie's picture in the newspapers, usually in short articles about the case, accompanied by a photo of her looking gaunt and lifeless behind bars. Whenever that happened, I would hide the paper, burying it deep in the trash can, not wanting Lucy or Matthew to see it. They were too young to understand, and I didn't want their pure smiles to be tainted by a cruel truth about their mother. But I knew that one day I would have to tell them. I would have to explain why she was gone. The thought made me shudder, but I told myself that when the time came, I would find a way for them to understand without letting the pain destroy them. At night, when Lucy and Matthew were fast asleep, I would sit at the kitchen table and opened the old journal I had started writing in since my first days in Santa Fe. My hand, less shaky now, would glide across the pages, leaving these words: "Today Lucy drew a family. She doesn't know that this red roof is all we have, but I will do whatever it takes to make sure it always stands strong. They will grow up surrounded by love and truth, not lies and fear, and no one will ever dare use a red pen to mark their faces again." I closed the journal and turned off the light, leaving only the sound of my two little angels' peaceful breathing from the next room and the soft murmur of the night wind coming through the window. Sometimes in my dreams, I still see Maggie's face, not the one from the courtroom, but the young woman who once shyly entered my home with a bouquet of daisies and a nervous smile. I wake up and the tears fall silently, not out of nostalgia, but from the pain of a betrayed trust. But then I hear Lucy calling me cheerfully from the living room, or Matthew's mischievous laugh as he plays with his dad, and I know I can't let the past drag me down again. I wipe my tears, get up, and prepare for a new day for my little family. One night after reading a story to my two grandchildren, Austin stayed with me in the living room. "Mom, I found a stable job here," he said, his voice low but firm. "I want to stay in Santa Fe to raise the kids with you. We'll make it, right?" I looked at my son and saw a determination in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Of course we will, son," I replied, taking his hand. "We'll make it because we have each other." Austin smiled, and for the first time in many months, that smile was no longer heavy with burdens. In the darkness, as the streetlight filtered through the blinds, I understood that my family after the storm had truly been reborn. It was a painful rebirth, built on the broken pieces of trust and love, but it was full of hope. I stood up, went out to the balcony and looked at the quiet street. The church bells rang in the distance, like a reminder that no matter how cruel the past had been, we, me, Austin, Lucy, and Matthew, would keep moving forward, with love as the light guiding our way. Deep in my heart, I understood that what happened wasn't just my family's tragedy, but a warning to everyone. Sometimes the person who hurts you the most is the one you trusted completely. Naivety, blind faith, can become an open door for darkness to enter. But I also learned that the love and courage of a mother, of a grandmother, always have the strength to protect and to guide. I want to say something to everyone. Learn to pay attention to the strange signs. Don't close your eyes for fear of facing the truth. A family is only truly preserved when we have the courage to defend it with all our hearts and with firmness, even in the face of the most painful betrayal. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you have the courage to face it all to reclaim your own voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for another. God always blesses, and I'm sure that bravery will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I will leave two of the channel's most beloved stories. I think you'll be surprised by them. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.